But you find a few of them have decided they are the owners of real estate even in this country, Madam Speaker. So as we bring in this bill, I am hoping we are not just looking at those who have trust or anything. We are starting with those who decided to make Kenya a country where they've taken money, dirty money from their country, and decided to invest in this country. Madam Speaker, we also need to look at, and I want to thank the chair and to tell the chair, Chair, you walk into some of these wholesales that we have, and you ask to pay a bill. And you find the owner says, you can't pay with Lipa and M-Pesa. You can only pay by withdrawal. It means that person does not want to really account to this country and does not want to show his or her sales the way. And so you run away from QUERRIE, you run away from everything, and you just keep. And because Kenyans want to buy, they just buy. But it is wrong, Madam Speaker. And there are many of them in all over, especially in my constituency. There are so many. What about if I will think they are also doing money laundering? We have to think of it as you look at it, as you open up for public participation. Also quietly walk in. Just see how some of these things function, and you realize we have put our country into a lot of risk. Madam Speaker, the other thing we need to be asking ourselves, even as I speak of the real estates, where people have just put in a lot of money. But then the other thing now, when I'm looking at the bill, Madam Speaker, I want to ask the chair to look at, to rethink, I don't know. When you establish a committee to be known as the Counter-Financing of Terrorism Inter-Ministerial Committee, Madam Speaker, why we have not conquered this thing is the moment you put up a whole ministerial committee, and this is a very serious thing. And so you find you have the cabinet responsible of internal, which is okay. Definitely they will send a representative. Then you have a cabinet secretary responsible of matters of finance. They will send a representative. My biggest worry is today you have so-and-so in this committee. The next sitting, the person who was in that committee will not be available, and so you'll have another person coming in to sit in, and you find this is this thing that covers now these departments is what is going to it is the one that is going to kill the spirit of this bill, because that institutional memory, as my brother says, colleague, that you cannot have, and we would either think of an authority, think of something better, but not this team that is going to handle this committee. They will be used, and you can imagine now having this committee, and your enforcement team is also there with a very long list, and so they will blame each other. We will end up in blame game. Instead of now us dealing with real matters of laundry, we will have blame game, others will be compromised, Madam Speaker. We will still end up with the same challenges we are facing, Madam Speaker. So for me, I want to plead with the committee. Look at your agencies that is you have put in place to enforce, but also look at your committee. You might do very good work with the bill. You might bring us a bill thinking we are dealing with money laundering. We will end up having the same challenges we've been having, where we are compromised. And we know as ourselves, it is something that is hurting this country, that until we come out of that culture of being compromised, we shall be compromised, and this will be the worst for us. But I just want to tell now that the majority leader is back, that this is issue of foundations. Some of us have run foundations for many years, Madam Speaker. This matter of saying that we can loot money and put in, that we take two, I think my majority leader must visit my children's home in Ngong and look at how a children's home is run and sustained without having government money, and 58 have gone to campus, and many others. And it's a school. It's a home and a school. So for me, naming members of parliament who have foundations, I think that one, it will be very unfair. It's good to go and see the work they are doing, and I know there are many. We have those who have education funds. So do you want to tell us within the education funds, some people have put in illicit financing or what? So it will be very important, even as we look at the bill, let us look at some of the clauses that are very critical, that can affect some of the sectors and work around. But I know, Madam Speaker, this is one bill that we need for the country. We need to look at not just that. We have many other things that people do, Madam Speaker, especially in the oil sector, in the gas sector. That is where money laundering is done very seriously. So let us not just run away. We can name, but let us also be very cautious as we do it. For me, I wish, and I'm hoping the chair is listening, that the committee will let this house down. We need to rethink and reorganize it in a better way so that it can work. With those many and few remarks, Madam Speaker, I want to really support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Beatrice. The Honorable John Waweru, member for Dagoretti North.
Madam Speaker,
member for Dagoretti South.
Madam Speaker, the confusion can be excused because my neighbor has just ceded the floor and it is becoming a Dagoretti affair, and we actually see ourselves as one larger Dagoretti. So I do not get offended when I'm called a member of Dagoretti North, neither does she get offended when she is referred to as member of Dagoretti South. Madam Speaker, this is real business that we are transacting this afternoon in this house. Madam Speaker, presented here very ably and very eloquently by the Chairman Jailak, is a raft of amendments that will see a drastic shift in how we attend to matters that have to do with fraud. And Madam Speaker, at times we refer to fraud and give it some fancy names. We call it very big English names. But thuggery is thuggery, Madam Speaker. Theft is theft, and crime is crime. Here we are attending to matters that seek to mitigate on issues that lead to criminal activities, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, before I go into the heart of this motion, I'd like to say that I support. And secondly, I would want to preliminarily say that I had the honor of recently visiting a country in the name of South Korea. Madam Speaker, the city I visited is not the biggest, or the second biggest, or third biggest. It is actually the 10th biggest city in South Korea. But when you look at the infrastructure, when you look at the governance, when you look at the development, I can tell you, Madam Speaker, that there is no city in East or Central Africa that is at the level of the 10th largest city in South Korea. A country that we are told we were at par with in the 60s. And I acknowledge the change of guard, and I would wish to take the opportunity to welcome Mr. Speaker so that I do not confuse myself and call him Madam Speaker. That would be sacrilegious. Mr. Speaker, I was saying that the city I visited was actually not the biggest city, neither was it the third or fourth biggest city. It was the 10th biggest city. However, the development, the governance, the infrastructure in that 10th largest city is not comparable to any city in East and Central Africa. Where did we go wrong, Mr. Speaker? If in the 60s we were at par with South Korea, Mr. Speaker, at the end of my trip, I said to myself that the biggest difference between Kenya and South Korea today is not the brick and mortar issues, is not the laws that they make. It is actually the soft issues that we never attend to, Mr. Speaker. The soft issues of discipline, the soft issues of honesty, the soft issues of integrity and the soft issues of meritocracy. Mr. Speaker, the patriotism in such countries is admirable. So even as we are attending to the hard laws, we've got to also ask ourselves, what are we doing to attend to the soft issues in this country? What are we doing to encourage patriotism? What are we doing to encourage honesty? What are we doing to encourage meritocracy, Mr. Speaker? Even as we are making such big laws, if we do not attend to the soft issues, we will never be at par to the countries that we were talking about that were at par with us in the 60s and now are being considered as first world countries. Mr. Speaker, I support this bill because I see us taking a step towards remedying some of the mischief that we are attending to as a House presently. Mr. Speaker, there is a matter that yourself and myself shall have to interrogate, the matter of the world coin. It is alive, it is present, and it is pressing. Kenyans lining up in their thousands to have their eyes scanned with an orb that no committee in this House can tell you what is carried in that orb. No one knows what the medical implications would be after that scan. Mr. Speaker, we do not know what the connection is between the scan of the iris and the cryptocurrency inducement that is being given to Kenyans. We do not even understand how a foreign company that is registered maybe somewhere in the US, we are seeing registration somewhere in Germany, and then it is also got representation from the United States of America, how such a company ended up being able to defy orders to seize the operations, orders granted by the office that is given the powers to seize such activities, the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner, totally disregarded. They went ahead and booked an office somewhere in the KICC and started out operations. These are the matters that we seek to attend to by changing the raft of laws that have been listed here by the chairman. Mr. Speaker, the committee that I chair, the Committee on Communication, Information and Innovation, has a live matter in front of it. A matter that has to do with monies that were transacted in the dying minutes of the last term. Even as we were going into elections, there was monies changing hands to the tune of 6-point-something billion Kenya shillings. Monies that made its way out of the country into safe havens. Monies that eventually also found their way back to local accounts in this country. But monies, thankfully, Mr. Speaker, that have actually been frozen in some international accounts where Kenya has failed to attend to such issues. The other jurisdictions that are attending to them with the seriousness that they deserve. So, Mr. Speaker, when I look at the raft of changes that we seek to do here, the only thing I would want to urge my colleagues is that the contributions sound really good in our second reading. I hope that we shall see these recommendations that are being made showing up in the third reading, so that when we see a matter that might not be complete, the build that I contribute during the second reading, I bring it up in the third reading as an amendment so that we can build onto what the chair has presented and so that we also what has been presented. Mr. Speaker, I did take note of the mischief that this motion seeks to remedy in the area of virtual assets and virtual asset service providers, because here now we are going into the realm of technology, We are going into the realm of innovation. And my proposal is that when we attend to matters that have to do with innovation, stifling innovation, and also policing and superintending over matters that have to do with innovation. So, Mr. Speaker, I shall be having some few amendments that I shall be proposing for consideration in the third reading so that we can fortify what has been proposed here, so that even as we seek to attend to the mischief that is occasioned by cases like the example I gave of WorldCoin, we also do not stifle technology while we are trying to police over these matters. Mr. Speaker, the final one would be something that I would pose to the House for us to think about. Mr. Speaker, we have seen countries that have presented themselves as leaders in the fight against corruption globally. But Mr. Speaker, I am very well informed today as a Kenyan that even as we celebrate other jurisdictions, they have their failings. Mr. Speaker, this continent has been a victim of exploitation for millennia. There are individuals who for centuries upon centuries have landed in this continent, stripped it of its resources, and extradited those resources to capitals abroad. And we celebrate them today as best practice in matters of anti-corruption. I would call upon ourselves to think of how we can leapfrog, to be the best case studies globally, not to try and copy what has been done internationally, Mr. Speaker, because even some of those capitals that we celebrate today have been built on the back, sweat, tears, and bloods of the exploitation of this continent. This continent can offer its own solutions. We can leapfrog to the front, and we can be the best case example where people can be coming to seek counsel on how to attend to matters of integrity and ethics. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity. I do appreciate and I support.
Thank you, Honorable QUERRIES. The Honorable Geoffrey Ruku, MP from Bere North.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity. Mr. Speaker, I rise to give my contribution on this amendment, which is touching on quite a number of pieces of law, or pieces of laws. Mr. Speaker, if you go to page 1092 of this amendment bill, it touches on Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes Act in trying to change the definition of what economic crime is. And Mr. Speaker, we have to be in a position of coming up with laws which are in tandem with the object and reasons of each and every act which is being amended here. You realize that the objects and reasons of the Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes Act, number 3 of 2003, if it is changed to take care of what is proposed by this amendment bill, Mr. Speaker, then it will not be in line with the objects and reasons of this act, which is in possession at the moment. So, Mr. Speaker, this is something which I would want to point out so that it can be taken care of, and probably we can have an amendment as we go to the third reading of this bill to ensure we align everything properly so that we may not water down other pieces of law which have been in existence and which are doing a good job to the nation. The other important point to note, Mr. Speaker, is that already we have Proceedings of Crime and Money Laundering Act of 2009, which take care of drug dealing, human trafficking, wildlife poaching, financing of terrorism, and other offenses. This act, Mr. Speaker, it is very well sorted, it is precise, and it takes care of some of these offenses. within the Proceedings of Crime and Money Laundering Act of 2009. Therefore, I don't think, Mr. Speaker, if we do amend the Anti-Corruption and Economic Crime Act by inserting this, changing the definition, we really augur very well. Instead, it will end up diluting the intent and purpose of Anti-Corruption and Economic Crime Act. The other important thing to mention, Mr. Speaker, is the fact that the way the corruption index is normally mentioned, it is indeed gross that we have many countries in the West where the proceedings of crime, of corruption, they end up in their countries, in those countries. But those countries, when it comes to the World Corruption Index, you realize they are ranked as the least corrupt nations in the world. This World Corruption Index, the way whoever comes up with that index, they are taking some of nations like Kenya as if we have not gone to any school, as if we have not attended any class, Mr. Speaker, as if we don't know any parameters which are used, because you cannot get the crime, the proceedings of crime, the proceedings of corruption, take it to your country, and use that money within your economy, and then you are ranked or you claim you are one of the least corrupt nations in the world. That is, I don't know whether this is parliamentary, Mr. Speaker, but it's nonsensical, and taking African nations for granted as if we are just fools. We are not fools, Mr. Speaker, and that has to find a way of getting to those international forums so that the nations which take this money within their banks, within their financial system, they can be ranked as the most corrupt nations in the world, Mr. Speaker. With those remarks, Mr. Speaker, I only want to point out that the object and the reasons of Anti-Corruption and Crimes Act, if the definitions of crime, the definition of economic crimes is changed, then will definitely affect the entire meaning of that. We will be required also to change the reasons and object of Anti-Corruption and Economic Crime Act, or number 3 of 2003. And since this amendment, this bill, has not touched on the object and reasons, then we need to relook on page 1092, the section or the clause which is talking about the amendment of economic crime, or definition of economic crimes. That's something which you need to take care of, Mr. Speaker, and bear in mind that bear in mind the act of the Proceedings of Crime and Anti-Money Laundering Act of 2003 takes care of what this amendment on this page want to achieve. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And with those many remarks, I propose that this be taken care of in the next reading, third reading, and an amendment proposed, Mr. Speaker. And I wish I would do that when the third reading comes on this floor. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Geoffrey Ruku. The Honorable John Mutunga, the Member of Parliament for Tigania.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for...
Honorable Mutunga, just before you proceed, let me acknowledge the presence within the House of Parliament of pupils and their teachers from Iruma Primary School, from Mara constituency in Tharaka Nithi County. You are welcome to the House of Parliament for your studies and for your learning. And may you travel back safe when your tour, your study tour ends. On behalf of the Speaker of the National Assembly and on behalf of the House, feel welcome. Honorable Mutunga.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, on behalf of the Member of Parliament for Mara constituency, I also salute the Iruma Primary School students, pupils, I studied in Chogoria Boys, which is near, and I know where Iruma Primary School is, and I would like them to keep on working very hard and getting to know, seeking for knowledge, because knowledge is unbound. Honourable Speaker, I stand to support the bill on anti-money laundering that has been put before the House, which is the National Assembly Bill number 35 of 2023. Honourable Speaker, money laundering is a criminal offense. And a criminal offense normally has two solutions. One, you can either be imprisoned or you can be fined, or both. So we expect that this particular amendment comes in to improve on the penalties specified in the 2009 legislation on anti-money laundering, the Act on Anti-Money Laundering. Honourable Speaker, the assets of the culprits could also be frozen wherever they are. And I believe we have relationships with countries, especially those countries where Kenyans are fond of keeping money stolen from here. We also probably have a possibility for extradition of those resources to come back and develop this country. So I believe this has all been taken care of in developing this particular legislation. Honourable Speaker, money laundering is closely linked to terrorism activities, because terrorism funding or financing does not go through the normal banking system. It goes through shortcuts. Therefore, you need to enhance the provisions of this law to make sure that at least it doesn't leave any loophole for terrorism financing. The legislation also, Honourable Speaker, hopefully will reduce our country's vulnerability to money laundering, especially the fact that now Kenya is a money economy. Kenya is an economy which is basically a cash economy, not money, cash economy. What problems exist with money laundering, Honourable Speaker? If I look at the existing legislation, I pick out a few issues. One of them is the inability to comprehensively deal with the related issues, especially those happening in our neighboring countries. Kenya as a country cannot be live as an island. Kenya relates with the other countries across, and therefore, what happens in those countries affect our country. Also, there is also delay in the implementation of the Act itself. It took quite some time for us to interpret it and put mechanisms to implement this particular Act. The other issue that also comes out in this particular respect is the difficulties in monitoring the movement of the people and especially the terrorists themselves. The other issue that comes out when I look through the Act that is being amended are the penalties. They have not been punitive enough. And the lack of proper linkages between the money laundering issue and terrorism. But Honourable Speaker, even as we speak about money laundering, we have experience with other countries which are cash economy countries. And Honourable Speaker, I have in mind a city I have visited several times called Guangzhou in China. Honourable Speaker, in Guangzhou, you have to have cash to buy anything. They do not deal with cards, they don't do bank transfers, you have to have hard cash. And that makes me pose and ask a few questions, especially about this particular legislation. Does having to deal with cash frustrate legitimate businesses? Are we saying that about 100% of business, or 80–90% of businesses in Guangzhou are illegitimate because they deal cash? Honourable Speaker, does this dealing with the cash in such a large town, such a large city, end up corrupting the financial systems of that particular country? Does it necessarily end up corrupting the financial systems of a country? Does Guangzhou dealing with cash necessarily corrupt the financial system of China? Because we are dealing with a law here which brings in restrictions, and these restrictions must be thought through very carefully. Honourable Speaker, does it also end up corrupting the socio-political system of the country? Because dealing with money is linked to corruption. Does it also diminish the government's possibility to collect revenue through taxation? Does it necessarily do that? Does it weaken the government control over the economy? Is our economy going to be messed up by a presence of cash? If our economy is going to be messed up by presence of cash in the economy, in the market, what effect does it have on those other countries which insist on using cash? Does it also lead to undermining the integrity of the financial systems within that particular country? And finally, Honourable Speaker, the other question I have, which I hope the legislation has answered, is whether it threatens the integrity and stability of the banking sector, and also the foreign exchange, operators, the forex bureaus. Does it threaten their integrity? Honourable Speaker, why does money laundering happen in this country? And that's a question we need to answer so that the Kenyans may understand why we should have come up with a very serious legislation on this. One of the reasons why money laundering is key or important to us is because we have a porous border with some of our neighbors. Some of the borders with our neighbors are porous. Anything can pass through anytime, unrestricted. Honourable Speaker, the other problem is that the borders of those neighbors with other countries are also porous. In fact, the idea is that their borders are a lot more porous than what lies between Kenya and their country. So anything can enter into those countries and it find itself in Kenya. Resources can enter those countries and those resources can find their way into Kenya. Terrorism activities can be managed in those countries. Money to finance terrorism activities in those countries can go in and basically permeate into this country. Honourable Speaker, the other issue is they are extensively unsecured. I mean, the porous borders are associated a lot more to terrorism activities, especially the financing aspect of it. In that respect, therefore, we need stronger legislations, we need tougher penalties, and we need monitoring of these, implementation of these legislations. So to provide for, this particular legislation comes in, therefore, to provide for the following, based on what I've seen in the provisions. Effective prevention of money laundering. Effective, the use of the word effective here means that we shall have controls that are largely operating to a large extent to contain money laundering in this particular country. It will also enable the Central Bank of Kenya, who is the regulator here, to develop prudential guidelines to the banking sector and therefore regulate the banking sector in the sense that it will make sure the banks do their work without getting free money or rather lose money. It is also aimed at strengthening the customer due diligence and enabling the CBK to come up with good procedures. Also, make the penalties stricter and also ensure prudential management of these particular penalties. Honourable Speaker,
how many more minutes do you need to conclude? You have it.
The reason why we are bringing in some of these issues is because Kenya needs to be protected. And who in Kenya do we need to focus on? We need to focus on real estate agents. In most cases, properties in this country are bought cash. Honourable Speaker, I have had experience, or rather witnessed a situation where properties have been bought cash to the tune of millions of shillings, tens of millions or even hundreds of millions of shillings, cash. When you build a house, it does not necessarily say that you borrowed a loan. You took a loan from a certain institution. It does not necessarily give, or rather provide for where the money came from. So if we can invest money that is not known where it has come from, When we declare some of these resources as our resources, as our wealth, how does this legislation take care of that declaration? How do we go back and try to ascertain where this money came from? We need also to be able to deal with, to engage the precious metal dealers. Those who deal with gold, those who deal with diamond, those who deal with other precious metals. They deal with a lot of cash. They earn a lot of money. Also the legal professionals. We need also to go all the way to looking at the accounting systems and the accountants in this country. The law needs to scrutinize clearly how do they manage their processes. Honourable Speaker, money is transferred through legal agencies. If money is not very clearly earned, if there are no mechanisms of ascertaining that this money has been properly earned, legal agencies are engaged to craft agreements, and these agreements are used to transfer huge amounts of money. How does this law make sure that the legal agencies are also restricted in doing such business? Honourable Speaker, if we have to secure Kenya, we need to secure Kenya properly. And this law comes in to basically ensure that money laundering does not occur. Honourable Speaker, I hope the law will provide for as much and even more. And that.
Thank you, Honorable John Mutunga. Do we have Honorable Julius Meli, the MP for Tinderet? Not in the House. The Honorable Joseph Oyula, MP for Butula. Honorable Joseph Oyula is a finance mind, so he must speak. Honorable John Bwire, you will follow thereafter. Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to also add my voice to this bill. I want to start off by supporting the bill because, Mr. Speaker, the bill attempts to cover gaps related to money laundering and combating of terrorism financing. Mr. Speaker, we have had gaps in the laws that were presented to the committees, and as such, controls of money laundering in this country has been weak. I think with the passing of this bill, Mr. Speaker, we should be able to cover a lot in the areas of money laundering. Mr. Speaker, people have brought in illicit funds to this country. The bill does not attach to anything to do with the flow of illicit funds. These illicit funds can be tracked to various constructions that we have seen in this town. However, I believe that with these amendments coming in place, the authorities concerned should be able to follow up some of these illicit funds. Mr. Speaker, we may have very good laws as we are trying to amend these laws. However, the biggest problem we have is the investigative arm of the government. Some organization, some group that can investigate thoroughly and make sure that all the illicit funds, all the laundered money is brought to book and accounted for. Mr. Speaker, Kenya was behind other African countries as far as control of money laundering is concerned. A lot has been seen in Kenya, and that's why I'm saying that the investigative arm may be weak in the control, even if we have the law. So it is important, Mr. Speaker, that we also look at the investigative arm and see how that arm can be strengthened to ensure that money laundering in this country or illicit cash flows are eradicated in totality from this country. It may take time, Mr. Speaker, but it's a disease that we think must be cleared. The problem, as I mentioned, is the investigative arm. Mr. Speaker, there has been ability to trace some of the monies has not been really possible because of the law. I think now, Mr. Speaker, the authorities concerned should be able to trace some of the monies between the countries, the member countries in Africa and beyond. Mr. Speaker, the extradition of the offenders, that's another area that has been weak. I think we should be able now, with this law coming in force, people concerned should be extradited to the places where they are required. And this amendment has brought in that, and I hope, Mr. Speaker, we will get the people concerned with this money laundering captured where necessary. You will recall the Triton case in Kenya, where lots of money was transferred outside the country, but it was not possible to extradite the responsible people to come and answer for the money that they took out of the country. So, Mr. Speaker, this bill should be supported fully by this House, and the House should also look into the investigative arm, so that where the bill is, the law is there, but we failed to get the money through failure to investigate properly. So with those few remarks, Mr. Speaker, I beg to support.
Thank you very much, Honorable Yola. The Honorable John Bwire, MP for Taveta.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I've had the privilege of going through the amendment bill prepared by JLAC under the leadership of our senior colleague, Mr. Murungaru. I appreciate substantial part of the bill. I'm in agreement and I support. But Mr. Speaker, allow me to pick one item in this bill that I sincerely have a challenge with. Mr. Speaker, you will appreciate that since 2019, we have been having a serious debate as to whether we should lift the advocate-client confidentiality. That is the rule of privilege. It has been in court for quite some time. What has been proposed as an amendment in this bill is that now advocates do not have an obligation to report, but their supervisory bodies, which is the Law Society of Kenya, can direct an advocate to disclose certain information about a client. Whereas I appreciate that there is some significant change from the old provision.
Order, Honorable Bwire, which clause are you speaking to?
When I'm speaking to clause number, the proposed amendments to section 36 of the Anti-Money Laundering Act. You know, if you can look at, I'm discussing about section 36, the new section 36B, 36A, 36A5, 36A5E, 36B, 36C. You will note from those provisions, these are an amendments to the Proceeds of Crime and Anti-Money Laundering Act of 2009. Mr. Speaker, if you will see from these provisions, there is a recommendation that now reporting by advocates can be done as long as it is recommended by the supervisory board. And 36B says, supervisory board may cooperate and coordinate with domestic and foreign counterparts for purposes of combating money laundering and terrorism and financing, and it goes ahead and say, including share of information and documents with a domestic or a foreign counterpart. And Mr. Speaker, why am I'm saying? For us to appreciate the rule of attorney-client privilege, we must agree that this is a common law rule. It is a very old rule. In fact, my little research shows me that it started in the year 1700. And the mischief cured by that rule is two, Mr. Speaker, two rights, two absolute rights. This is the presumption of innocence and the right against self-incrimination. Mr. Speaker, there are two categories of people under which are categorized that any information shared by them is literally a violation of right against self-incrimination. And one of that person, Your Honor, is an advocate of the attorney. And the second person is a spouse, Mr. Speaker. The reason why we have that rule of attorney-client privilege is to protect against that rule of self-incrimination, Mr. Speaker, and the right of and the presumption of innocence. Mr. Speaker, if we can now say that as long as a supervisory board recommends sharing of information, then an advocate has an obligation to share that information, then, Your Honor, we are going against that fundamental right of human beings against self-incrimination and on the presumption of innocence, which an advocate accesses this information by virtue...
Order, Honorable John Bure. I thought we were debating this up to 7, and I thought we would conclude it. I'm told the substantive speaker directed earlier on that we have an adjournment motion from 6. So the next thing, the next time this particular bill will be listed for proceeding, possibly by Tuesday, you will have 5 minutes. And I like the points you are beginning to bring.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm guided.
In fact, I see the chair of the committee very anxious yeah, but there is a direction already which we cannot review. In fact, that is what the clerk came to tell me. That I understand, Honorable Murugara, but I only assist the speaker, and I'm informed the speaker directed at exactly 6 we adjourn to discuss a matter of national importance. In terms of traditions and practices, only the substantive speaker can make variation to that particular rule. So, Honorable John Bure, advocate, you will have 5 minutes the next time we speak. Honorable Murugara, I empathize. I was also anxious that we conclude it today. But with that earlier ruling, it is impossible. In fact, the clerks are reminding me that the majority leader was to help you in replying. And that is what they have indicated to me. I'd thought sincerely that we could be done today. But that ruling of the speaker, is cast on stone. There is nothing I can do with it as a mere member of the speaker's panel. It will take the speaker to change it. So regrettably, we have to move to the adjournment motion. Honorable Geoffrey Ruku, proceed and move. In terms of the standing orders, Honorable Geoffrey Ruku will have 10 minutes, and then each member will have 5 minutes. Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the motion on adjournment on a definite matter of urgent national importance regarding the new financing model for higher education and technical institutions. Honorable Speaker, Pursuant to studying under 33.1, I seek leave for the adjournment of the House for the purpose of discussing a matter of urgent national importance regarding the new financing model for students joining universities, colleges, and technical institutions in Kenya. Honorable Speaker, under the new financing model, the level of funding to be extended to each student will be based on several factors to be determined by Higher Education Loans Board and the Universities Fund. Among the factors to be considered are parent background, gender, program type and cost, marginalization, disability, family size and composition, government priority areas, and affirmative action. The object and the spirit of the new tertiary education financing model is to promote inclusivity and equal opportunity to accessing higher education by addressing financial barriers that hinder many students from pursuing higher education and technical training. Honorable Speaker, there are serious concerns that the new financing model may put unrealistic burden on parents and guardians amidst the turbulent economic times, thereby disadvantaging some students who qualify to pursue higher learning. In addition, an analysis of various programs in different universities indicate that some public universities are charging higher tuition fees than some private institutions, thereby jeopardizing accessibility and affordability of higher education. It is also notable that the previous government subsidy for higher learning has been removed, and therefore students who miss out on government scholarships and loans will have to pay the entire amount. Further, students will be required to apply for tuition funding every year with no guarantee of securing the funds on each application, among other tougher terms. Honorable Speaker, while the new model could unlock a lot of potential in transforming funding for higher learning in our country, abundant caution must be exercised so that it does not jeopardize access to higher learning in this country. This is a matter of great concern given that the students who search for Kenya Certificate of Secondary Education, KCSE, in year 2022 are due to join universities and colleges in September 2023. Yet it is not clear whether the model will facilitate accessibility and affordability to higher learning or may end up commercializing the sector. Honorable Speaker, it is against this background that I seek leave for the adjournment of the House to discuss this matter of great national concern. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Honorable Speaker, tertiary institutions stands as a beacon of knowledge, molding the mind of our future leaders and advancing our society. Mr. Speaker, majority of the leaders who are here, the members of parliament, are in this house courtesy of education. It is true that were it not for education, Mr. Speaker, myself, I would not be a member of Better North constituency, represent the people of Better North. Thus, there is need for the country to ensure fair and accessible higher education opportunities to every qualified Kenyan student. Honorable Speaker, on May 3rd, 2023, the Kenya government rolled out the variable scholarship and loan funding model. In the new funding model, students from vulnerable and extremely needed background will receive 100% financing, while those from needed and less needed background will get 93% financing. Household income bands are classified according to the monthly household income, Mr. Speaker, as outlined below. Vulnerable, Kenya sharing 0. Extremely needy, Kenya sharing 23,671 per month. Needy, Kenya sharing 23,672 to Kenya sharing 70,000. And less needy, Kenya sharing 70,001 shilling to 200,000 Kenyan shilling. Honorable Speaker, as we strive to provide for equitable and quality higher education for all Kenyans, it is our duty to scrutinize the flaws inherent in the means testing approach and explore more effective avenues for financing our institutions of higher learning. Honorable Speaker, while designed with good intentions, the mean testing instrument presents a number of challenges that must be addressed by this House or by the Ministry of Education. The following are the challenges that are associated with the new financing model, Mr. Speaker. One, whereas the tuition fees have not been increased as per the degree program, the previous automatic government subsidy has been removed, and the student who meets the government scholarship and loans will have to shoulder the entire burden. Number two, Mr. Speaker, more students qualified in medicine, in engineering, in pharmacy, in other technical courses like actuarial sciences, and many other technical issues will choose to do less expensive courses simply because their family cannot afford their dream career path. This might end up killing careers in medicine, in engineering, and other highly technical studies at the expense of art-based programs. Number three, Mr. Speaker, the funding model also put needed students at risk, since qualification for tuition funding has to be done each year with no guarantee of securing the funds in each application. Mean testing requires extensive effort to collect and verify financial data from the applicants. The complexity may lead to delays in funding, disbursement, and administrative inefficiencies. Resources that could be directed towards enhancing education programs and services may instead be spent in the bureaucratic process, Mr. Speaker. Number five, the application system requires one to have identification card and could disadvantage many students who will not have gotten this document as they complete secondary school at an average of 16 or 17 years, Mr. Speaker. Internet connectivity in the rural areas has been a challenge, making the technology not very available in to many students in the rural areas and remote part of our country, Mr. Speaker. And I am sure many constituencies in the Republic of Kenya, Mbeere North included, there are quite a number of villages in Mbeere North and many other constituencies where internet availability is a problem. Also, Mr. Speaker, the very vulnerable students and their parents, they don't have computers. There are no cyber cafes. There is no these phones which can be able to access internet. They use Kambambe. How to make application through the platform provided for by the Ministry of Education is a problem in the very many remote areas of our country. Honorable Speaker, cognizance of these charges, it is apparent that this model will fuel corruption as parent and student strive to navigate the means testing procedure. Further, with the risk of unnecessary delays in accessing education, it will perpetuate violation of the constitutional provisions on the Bills of Rights, specifically Article 43(1)(f) of our Constitution, Mr. Speaker. Honorable Speaker, while the new model incorporates a diverse breadth of grants, loans, and household contribution that closely align with the specific needs and circumstances of individual students, there is an urgent need to ensure that it is properly implemented with the proper measures put in place by the Ministry of Education, Mr. Speaker. This is in full realization that KCSE 2022 candidates are set to join colleges and universities in early September 2023. And their rights should not be violated, Mr. Speaker, in any way. It is against this background, Mr. Speaker, and pursuant to standing orders, number 33(2), that I seek leave for adjournment of this House in order to discuss this development matter of urgent national importance regarding Kenya New University and TFET funding model. I urge the House to pass this development resolution calling out the Ministry of Education to arrest a potential problem before it unfolds and hurt this country and kill the whole generation. Mr. Speaker, it is also important to request the Minister of Education to avail himself to this House and explain clearly how the students in very remote areas where the parents are not able to access internet, where the parents don't have smartphones, the students which have not attained the age of 18, how they are going to be covered through this model. Honorable Speaker, I beg to move this motion, and I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Geoffrey Ruku, for this timely motion. The Honorable Dr. James Nyikal, MP for Seme, you want to speak to this?
Mr. Speaker, I support this motion. This is extremely important, Mr. Speaker. The funding system may be good, may be implementable, but basically the implementation plan for now is poor and bad. There is lack of information for the students. The admission letter tells you the total amount you need. But that is scaring the parents because the parents do not know that that is what is required for the students, but there are bursaries, loans, and help that they will get. So that is really the problem. The letter indicates and gives a website where you can apply, but it does not give enough information. When you get into that website, then you are going to use means testing. And means testing asks for a lot of information. Using that information, students are going to be classified vulnerable, very needy, needy, and not needy. Theoretically, at that point, actually most students many students may not pay, or if they pay, it will be very little, which is good, very good. But will that be done in the time that is available? Access is through the internet. And they need a registered phone in their names. And if they're looking for a loan, they'll need ID cards. And a number of students do not have ID cards, either because they are underage or they have applied but they have not received the ID cards. Mr. Speaker, the timeline for admission into universities is another problem. In some universities, they are expected to actually report on the 24th of this month. By the weekend, many students in my constituency had not even applied, had difficulty in applying. So we may have, in fact, theoretically as put, it's actually a good system, and you may actually, the students may actually end up paying less than they were paying before. But will they access that money in this time? Mr. Speaker, there is no clear infrastructure that has been set up to help the students. The centers are very far for some students. There's need for some Ministry of Education staff to support the students on how to do this. There are problems of internet. There are problems of computers. There are problems of phones. So, Mr. Speaker, my suggestion is this. I'm taking it in good faith that the system as designed, the money as indicated is available and will work. But how we are doing it right now is the problem. So my first suggestion is one, extend the period of admission to the universities. Set up centers, at least at constituency levels or closer, with computers and internet provision for students to apply, through which the students apply. And also with staff to assist the students. In fact, this is something you may do exactly in the same structure as you do elections. Then it will work. If we do not do that, many students, Mr. Speaker, will miss out without applying. Because the time is too short, there's no infrastructure. Once that is done, then we'll have the opportunity to see whether the design as it is works. There is the issue of whether will they get the money every year. But for me, let's start with this year, let's support them to apply, let's support them to get, and then we follow up. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honorable James Nyikal, the Honorable Julius Meli, the Chair of the Education Committee in the National Assembly.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I rise to support the motion by Honorable Ruku. Honorable Speaker, I being the Chair of Education and being an educationist, I first of all want to put the following issues very clearly. That education funding in this country has undergone several changes since independence. Between 1963 and 1975, there was almost free government scholarships for students going to university education. Between 1975 and around 1990, government scholarships and even out-of-pocket money was actually paid fully by the government. In 1991, when we just entered the university, there was the introduction of what we call the pay as you study, where government asked the students to pay part for the fees and part through loans. The loan system actually was introduced a bit earlier. Honorable Speaker, the changes in models, the funding model that we have today, what we call earlier before the current one, the new model, is what we call the differentiated unit cost, where universities and students were funded based on the courses and the infrastructural development of the university, and also on the level of development, overall level of the development, and even the course the student is taking. Earlier on, the funding was just uniform. However, with the new model, it is introduced, first of all, Honorable Speaker, to actually address about 3 or 4 main issues. That one, the government was actually funding the universities on a wholesale scale, where they were giving a lump sum amount of money divided by the total number of students, and you'll realize that if a university has 50,000 students, and the government has just given a figure, maybe, for example, 10 billion shillings, you'll realize that the universities were not getting enough money. That is why most of these universities are in debt. And for the government to really address that issue, the government said, we must pay each child the amount he requires for the course. That is why this new formula has come into play. 2, it is also to stop, and I want to ask honorable members, that even schools, secondary schools, do not actually line up in the Ministry of Education for a grant. They will always have some fees, and they are put directly to their account, and they will be responsible for the hiring of staff, payment of workers, and even for the purchase of the items they have. The new funding model has several challenges, and I think I want to thank Honorable Ruku and the members who have spoken before me, that one of the greatest challenge for this model is actually publicity. That the government and the minister needs to come out very clearly and tell the people how the model works. They need to disseminate the information down to the village, to the churches, to the schools, so that even as we prepare the next cohort of 2023-24 candidates, the schools and everyone else and the institutions these students are have actually the adequate information that is required in this new funding model. Honorable Speaker, the new funding model is quite ingenious and it is good. One of the things that this model is trying to address, and I think the House is quite aware of this, is the issue of universities have huge debts. And they were actually underfunded for quite some time. If you look at this, and I think that the parents have actually, I have some information here, Honorable Speaker, I want to bring before the House. There is the issue of the cost of a program. The program, for example, I want to give an example of a program here, which is, let me give an example of a program of a Bachelor of Science Education of a university. The total cost for tuition fees is 244,800. I'm giving an example of a less needy case, which is actually, as Honorable Ruku has just put it, we have 4 categories of students. We have the very vulnerable, that one who has almost zero and no ability, orphans and the rest.
Add him 2 minutes. This is the chair education. In fact, we. How many more minutes do you need to?
You give me 5. Yes.
I'll give you 4.
Yes.
Try, because it is important
Thank
that
you.
the nation knows.
Thank you. Actually, I want to thank Honorable Ruku because it is through this bill that we want to ask the ministry to disseminate the information and let the public know, and even the members of parliament who are here today. Let me take this case, a less needy case. These are parents who are earned between, or who earn over 200,000. They have 244,000 for the fees. The balance, the government scholarship is about 38%. The loan is 151, that is 93,151. Government loan is actually 55,000. And now this individual student will pay 17,106. Why am I saying this? There are instances where parents bring us, when we're in our constituencies, just as fee structure of 200,000. They say, we have been told to pay this amount. They haven't been told that, and you know the universities have just issued all the students with admission letters and fee structures attached to them. The student, having received this, is supposed to actually go to the nearest cyber center to actually go through the various stages of actually getting applying for the loan. Depending on his level of need, and I think Honorable Buruku has just put it, the parents' background, which are actually the mean testing instruments, their gender, the course type, the previous school attended, expenditure on education, family size and composition, marginalization, disability status, and the likes. If you look at that, based on those needs, because the child will be asked, which school did you go to? Who paid your fees? Maybe I was an orphan, it was paid by CDF. That in itself qualifies the child to get almost 100%. Apart from that, a question has been asked about upkeep. If you look at this, when you get us, for example, let me go to the vulnerable. We have a student who is very vulnerable. He gets a scholarship of 82%, he gets a loan of 18%, and he has out-of-pocket money of 44,000. That is out of pocket. That is for the upkeep at the university. So this student has gotten full school fees and has also gotten out of pocket. The problem with the current situation, as we speak, majorly, is the information to reach the parents. Two, it is also that most of these students, especially the needy and vulnerable, come from the interior, slums, areas where most of the information does not reach. Two, Honorable Speaker, there is an issue of timelines. In this particular document, timelines have been indicated that when a student applies for a loan, within a duration, it has 6 steps, and within a duration of 5 days, he's supposed to get a loan. I was with the Ministry of Education officials, but when you look at, first of all, the applicants are supposed to be 190,000. As we speak today, I don't think they are past 60,000. And this one includes the TVETs and all the other institutions. What Honorable Nyikal just put it across is that the admission and the timelines for students going to university has to be increased. Because as we speak now, most of the systems at times are down because of increased traffic. At times, the parents haven't gotten the information. The students haven't gotten enough time. And all this is actually attributed to administrative challenges. Honorable Speaker, there is an issue I also want to bring to the attention of members. Compared to the previous funding model, this model is actually going to give universities more money. In the second years and the third year students and the fourth year students are still using the differentiated unit cost. The money allocated this year for this particular funding model alone is about 40 billion shillings. Meaning that on average, every student is supposed to get about 200,000 shillings per program. Meaning that the issue of universities having or not having enough fees is going to be a thing of the past. So under why the House, we support the model. However, we want to ask the ministry to administer and make sure that this model is understood well, it reaches the parents, it reaches the students, and it is adequately addressed, especially on issues of challenges. I support, Honorable Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Julius Meli. The Honorable Mili for the Ambo Mabona, MP for Suba North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity, and I want to thank Honorable Geoffrey for this motion. Mr. Speaker, I'm hoping to be brief. In any event, you only have 5 minutes. My concern, Mr. Speaker, listening to Honorable Geoffrey and to the chairman of the Committee of Education, is that I get more confused than more answers. Mr. Speaker, if I, as a member of parliament who is representing my constituency, is confused about this, how much more are my constituents going to be confused? Because if you listen to Honorable Geoffrey, you see so many challenges with this model. On the other hand, you are saying that it's a better model and more students are going to get access to education. But I just want to agree with Honorable Geoffrey that we must ensure that even where we say that, because what he said is the subsidy has been removed. And if subsidy has been removed, then it means there's a category of students that is going to take up all that, that fee that they were not taking before. So in effect, it means the fee has been increased for that category of students. And so you will find that that category of student, most of them are going to drop off even the technical courses. And for me, that is very worrisome because as a country, we need to be producing doctors, nurses, you know, specialized courses. But if you have a system that is going to exclude people, Mr. Speaker, that is a grave concern. Speaking as a lawyer, I also want to raise concerns over the use of certain terms very, I don't want to say carelessly. But when you say we have the vulnerable, we have needy, we have less needy, sometimes I'm hearing extremely needy. So I don't know the categorizations, but even from that alone, I don't know which law, which is the legal framework that we are using to refer to that. And at this point, I wouldn't mind to be informed after I sit down so that you don't eat into my system. But is there a legal framework defining who is vulnerable? Because if there's no legal framework, then I can assure you if I had a child, with corruption in this country, my child would be very vulnerable. In fact, I would even add another adjective, I would say extremely vulnerable. Because this is Kenya. We know what Kenya and corruption is. Corruption is our middle name as a country. And as much as we are saying we are committed to eradicating corruption, it will take us years. And so, Mr. Speaker, I think for me the issue is, where is the legal framework? I'm also very concerned that even what the chair has agreed, even with the Honorable Geoffrey, because of lack of public participation, most people are not aware of this. Talking as a member of parliament who represents a rural constituency, we even have a challenge getting people out to access bursary, which is open. Everybody, almost everybody, let me say, the constituency knows. During the time when I was campaigning, I found a young man who had got an A and had been admitted to University of Nairobi in a place called Lusao in my constituency, which is sort of one of the farthest flung areas in my constituency. He had deferred his degree for 1 year, not aware that he could have come and asked for bursary in my constituency. Now you are telling this guy in Lusao, where there is no digital hub, to go and get and use a hub, a computer hub, to come and give information. Let us be realistic about the country we are living in. We have many people who things like computers sound like going to mass. So let us be realistic about the people that we are representing. Let us not operate as though we are representing people who live in Lavington, Kileleshwa, and Karen. We are representing people who live in Usao, in Sukuru and Sikri in my constituency. There are people who will not access these systems very easily. The other issue is also on the issue of identity cards, which has also been raised by Honorable Geoffrey. If you are talking about border constituencies like my constituency, getting normal identification is a problem. So it means, especially for people who are transiting from one system to another, that we will not be able to apply at all because we will not get IDs. It takes a year or 2 years even to get those IDs. So what are you telling us, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, I think I'll leave it because my time is up, but could I just request that we need a Kamkunji on this issue so that you inform members of parliament first on this issue so that we can be better representatives. Thank you.
Honorable Millie, just before you sit, I see you have a few seconds.
Oh, thank you.
Tell me, I have, you know, my eldest brother passed on. Now my nephew, immediate nephew, how do you consider his level of need to a son of some peasant farmers who are over 80 or over 60 years old, not earning regular income? How would, or how, in terms of your information, would their levels of need be categorized and defined?
Mr. Speaker, that is actually my challenge, because how you will classify a person as vulnerable, as needy, as extremely needy, and if you look at the number of people who are living below the poverty line, in this country almost 60% are extremely needy. So what we are basically saying is almost every, or 70% will qualify for this. Are we actually being realistic about this? Because we are going to knock off people because of this. And the other thing is we are going to push it to members of parliament, like you should see in our inboxes already, and I'm sure you're already facing it. People who are putting you in WhatsApp groups to collect funds for school fees, and we can't afford it. And mothers are panicking. There's a woman who keeps calling me from Bitter Town every day. She's called Lindsay. She calls me every day because she cannot afford fees for her child. And she's not the only one. There's one from Ogando, there's one from, I can count many of them. And Chair, we are actually putting the country in crisis. This is something, and I want to thank Honorable Geoffrey for raising this thing at this time. We need to deal with it as a matter of crisis. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. The Honorable Gideon Kimayo, the Member of Parliament representing the people of Keio South constituency. You are recognized.
Asante Bwana Spika. Mimi nashukuru Mheshimiwa Ruku kwa mada huu ambao ameuleta jioni ya leo, na namuunga mkono. Ngaji ninapomuunga mkono, kuna pia ambayo ile wizara ya elimu inafaa pia ituambie vizuri. Jambo la kwanza ni kwamba kuna ile ukosefu wa habari, yani hatuijui. Mimi kama mbunge hata sielewi hii mfumo umeletwa utafanywa namna gani, na umesikia jinsi ambavyo wabunge wenzangu pia wanaisema. Sasa kama sisi kama wabunge hatuielewi vizuri, ule mtu ambaye kwa mashinani ataelewa namna gani? Jambo la pili ni kwamba ile njia ambayo imesemekana itatumika kutambua yule ambaye atapata karo kiasi fulani, yule ambaye atapata basari ni kiasi fulani, wanasema itatumika kupitia kwa kompyuta. Ule mtu ambaye ako mashinani, kwa mfano mali mimi natoka, mtu ako pale ndani pale chini kwa Flospa pale Kerio Valley, atatoa wapi kompyuta? Hiyo ni njia ya kumfungia asipate hiyo msaada ya basari kwenye chuo kikuu.
Honorable Meli Julius, what is out of order?
To inform the member.
Honorable Kimayo, do you want to be informed?
Honorable Chair.
He can only inform you if you want information.
I allow.
Yes, thank you so much. Honorable Speaker, I just want to inform the member that even the current model of funding, it is actually computerized. There is no funding model as we speak today, which actually doesn't require the student to enter data. And two, it will also ensure, I think this particular model, as new as it is, it has teething problems. But it is a very good model because it is giving universities money. Assuming that we had the other one, that's the information I want to give, so that we don't think that we are introducing a model which is different from the others and it was manual. All of it has been having mean testing instrument. Thank you, Honorable. Mean testing. Yes.
Honorable Julius Meli, you were allowed by Honorable Kimayo to inform him. Now you have introduced a phrase called means testing. Could you unpack that? Yes. And in the context also of how you establish those categories, you say 23,000 to what? How do you establish them for non-salaried guardians? People who are living hand to mouth, like those parents in the villages or Kibra who do not earn, regular monthly salary like others.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I think, Honorable Speaker, each and every member who is here today has maybe when you go to a bank, when you go to a financial lending institution, they undertake or they actually guide you to fill a 2 or 3 page document, which in itself is trying to assess your ability to pay and the need for you to have those resources. In this particular case, that is actually an example of a mean testing instrument. It has been in use for several years. Even in the current system, students have been mean tested. Let me take to the constituency. I do in my constituency mean test orally the members, the beneficiary of CDF. If you are an orphan, you get more money. If you are from a single family and you are very needy, For example, your mother or your father is not employed or a peasant farmer, you get a better amount. If you are a child of a teacher in a rural constituency, for example, you will get less. What am I saying? The kind of mean testing that we have today is supposed to classify the child based on the school he attended. If he attended a very local school, if he was dropped by the parent to go to school, if he actually a beneficiary of scholarship or bursaries of CDF, that's an needy case. So amongst many others. But assuming that it is a child of Honorable Mele, where I'm dropping the child to school, the child is asked, what was the means of transport to school? I was dropped by the driver. I was taken to school by my parent. I went to a high-cost school. That child is actually going to be the category of the less needy. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
What of the, just a minute. Remember, Honorable Meli was just giving information. What of the child of my late brother, as Honorable Kaluma? Remember, you are going to categorize him as an orphan, which you confirm entitles him to more. You get what I'm talking about? What of the child of my late brother against the child of some villager who is existent? The guardians, the parents are there, but they don't earn at all. In fact, some are very old. And I'm asking this of you in terms of the information you're giving to the House, because I know you meet them in when you oversight CDF in your constituency. Yes, so we are talking about the deficiencies in just, bare clarifications. I remember that is what Honorable Millie Odhiambo was talking about. Honorable members, let us allow Honorable Kimayo, having been informed, to complete his contributions.
Asante Bwana Speaker, na ndaomba Speaker nipatie...
Honorable Millie, the Chair of Education Committee stood to inform Honorable Kimayo. You can not stand on a point of order to inform the Honorable Meli, who is also on a point of order to inform Honorable Kimayo. Order, Honorable Mili. Order. Honorable Kimayo, proceed. And your time is added so that you conclude your contributions.
Asante Bwana Speaker. Mheshimiwa Meli, nasema asante, nimefahamika, lakini mimi sikuwa nasema nakosoa huo mfumo. Nasema tu zile changamoto ambazo tutasipata hapa mbele. Na kwa mfano sasa wiki mbili ambazo zitakuja hapo mbele, wanafunzi wataenda shule na watalazimishwa kulipa hizo karo kama watafaidika kwa huu mfumo ya kupata huo msaada wa basari. So Bwana Speaker, mimi nilikuwa nasema kwamba namuunga mkono ndugu yangu Mheshimiwa Ruku kwa kuleta huu mada, na mimi nasema kwamba ni muhimu sana Wizara ya Elimu itueleze, itufahamishe. Manake kama sisi kama wabunge tuna changamoto ya kuielewa sasa nini itafanyika kwa ule mwananchi ambaye ako pale nje. Nikasema kwamba watupatie habari, tuielewe vizuri, tupate habari, kwa sababu kuna ukosefu wa habari. Bado tunahitaji taarifa zaidi kuhusu huu mfumo, na pia tupate kuielewa. Na ya tatu nikasema kwamba ile njia ambayo imetumika kutambua yule ambaye kwa ile wameweka kwa lugha ya Kimombo wakasema vulnerable na hizo zingine, watu waielewe. Lakini mimi namuunga mkono rais kwa kuleta huu mfumo, maana kulingana na ile chopo ambayo iliwekwa na rais ndio ilileta hii mfumo mpya. Manake pale mashinani unapata mtoto ambaye amesoma kwenye shule ambayo tuwaita academy, amepita kupata academy, ameshindana na ule mtoto ambaye anasoma ile shule ya msingi iliyo chini kabisa. Kwa mfano mali natoka kuna shule inaitwa Kipkanao, shule ya chini kabisa, haina madawati, haina madarasa, lakini inashindana na shule ambayo ni ya kibinafsi. Mtoto anapata alama 400 kwa sababu amesoma academy. Ule ambaye amesoma ile shule ya msingi ya chini, ile ya umma, anapata alama 200. Ule anaitwa shule ya Alliance, ule anaitwa shule ya Mangu. Huyo msasi wake anaweza kwa sababu alimpeleka shule ya academy. Wanapomaliza shule ya umma ya sekondari wanaitwa university, wanaitwa kwenye chuo kikuu, wanaenda tena kushindania ile shule ambazo ni za umma. Mimi kwa maoni yangu, wewe ambaye unapeleka mtoto yako kwa shule ya academy, ukitoka shule academy peleka shule ya kibinafsi ya sekondari, ukitoka shule ya kibinafsi ya sekondari peleka university ama peleka chuo kikuu cha kibinafsi. Wacha wale watoto wa umma ambao ndio wako chini zaidi wawezi kupatiwa